Pepper says, are you ready to declutter some more craft supplies? I know I am. It is that time of the week again. It is time to declutter some more craft supplies in this basement. And each week we have been going through these craft bins, letting go of stuff, and also rough organizing them bin by bin. We labeled the bins so that we can define a category, and we also put a check mark next to it so that we know that we already completed it. And I also found some more craft supply bins that were stored in other areas of the basement. So we'll be adding them to the pile. That way we can go through every single craft supply that's in this house. Hi everyone, as we're decluttering and going through the craft supplies, I'm going to be talking about how to overcome the fear of decluttering. I'm hoarding disorder. I have trouble discarding and letting go of items because I am emotionally attached to it. I've attached a story. It's been a coping mechanism. So logical tactics have never worked with me to start decluttering. I had to get over the fear of actually starting. I had to process the emotions of letting go. So that's why on this channel, we really focus upon the emotional side of decluttering. And I normally talk about baby step decluttering small sections at a time, letting go what only feels comfortable within your heart. But this time we're going to dive even a little deeper into those emotions. So we're going to talk about that as we go through all the craft supplies. It was fear that had stopped me from starting my decluttering recovery journey prior to 2018. There were years upon years that I wanted to start cleaning out my hoard. I wanted to start to live in a cleaner home, but I was so paralyzed in my fear that I just couldn't get past the emotion to get started. Fear was also a driving force that motivated me to hoard so that I could feel safe and secure because of my many past experiences, my PTSD, my anxiety. All those factors paralyzed me to not be able to start decluttering. Everybody experiences some form of fear, so this can help in other areas that you're struggling with too. But what I realized was, personally for my failure of decluttering for decades, was that it was actually in my fear was where I was going to find my healing. I had been avoiding dealing with those emotions, but at its root, that's where I had to start. The fear was my body's cue for letting me know that if I want to heal and feel peace and feel relieved, that this is where I had to do the internal work. And in my gut, I knew that if I did the internal work and I overcame the fear, that I would find so much peace, calmness, freedom, self-love, feel lighter and less anxious, and that I wouldn't feel trapped by my hoard anymore. Because as much as it did make me feel safe and secure, I knew that it also held me back. There is always a light at the end of the tunnel, so I knew that a wonderful reward, my peace, and not as anxious, was awaiting me. So first, I had to identify the fear. Was I afraid of failing? Was I afraid of uncertainty? Was I afraid of the loss? With my hoarding, it was all of the above. So I started with the fear that stuck out the most, and that was the fear of failing. The fear of failing is pretty common for most people, and for me, it was mostly applied to my ability to declutter and let go of items and to not live in a level 4 hoarded home for me and my family. So when I started to look within to see why this fear of failing to declutter was so extreme, I realized that it stemmed from my low self-esteem in this area. I never believed that I could declutter because of the emotions so tightly wrapped around the items. For my entire life, I gave a million and more reasons of why I needed to hold on to everything, but I never gave myself a reason to why I had to let go of anything. And in that self-reflection, I realized that the whole time I was basically guaranteeing my own failure, so why even start? I'll save myself the heartache. But staying in that heartache and living in that fear every day is so much worse than just trying to process those emotions so that you can feel lighter and actually start enjoying life even more. And when I looked even a little deeper, I realized that low self-esteem had stemmed back to childhood trauma. That was the source of it. Being so badly bullied and believing everything that the kids called me: ugly, stupid, chunky, disgusting. So many awful words that I didn't know how to detach their hateful comments from my own self-worth. So I believed them. And since I'm hoarding disorder, I was already attached to items as a child, and they already made me feel safe, and I put my self-worth into those items because at the time it was escapism. It was an expression of myself. I felt loved with all of my belongings around me in my room. So now that I identified the root of the fear, I can start to work through it. And a lot of that is therapy or talking about it. I talk with all of you about these instances. And also, when that fear or that feeling comes over me, I have learned to tell my inner child, my 11-year-old self, that she's none of those things and that she's beautiful, she's smart, she's worthy, and she's a good person. We don't have to worry about failing because we love ourselves and we give us the grace and time we need to process and declutter. I allow myself to be in a safe space while feeling my fear and releasing it. And since I'm releasing it, I'm feeling a lot more peaceful within myself and a lot more confident where I can create goals for myself. This is where baby step decluttering comes in. This is where I say declutter what feels right in your heart and never force yourself to let something go you're not ready to let go of, because we're continuously regulating our nervous system to know that we are safe and that there is nothing to fear. Now, something else that I realized that I used to do before we started decluttering, before I started overcoming the fear in 2018, was that I used to create a lot of excuses of why I couldn't declutter an area. And those excuses just made me feel more guilty about not being able to declutter. So instead, I gave myself grace, and that the excuses were just my body's reactions to protect itself from the fear that lived within me. And I knew that it would come up over and over again, like it has my entire life, until I actually addressed it. And being free of that fear, feeling the peace afterwards, feeling love and calmness were all on the other side of that fear. And a lot of times, fear comes from uncertainty and unable to predict an outcome. So to self-soothe that, I had to watch others decluttering, like Minimal Mom, Cass from Clutterbug. Those were the first two YouTubers that I started watching decluttering. And even though they weren't hoarders or had hoarding disorder, what helped me was that I could see their reactions, their emotions, the rewards to letting go of certain things and organizing them. And they just kind of made you feel overall good inside. So I felt that good energy and started visualizing myself decluttering, myself being able to let go and feel good about it. I was creating a predictable outcome in my mind and my body so that I could overcome that fear of starting. And I will admit, it took about a month of me of visualizing and writing it down before I felt confident enough to start taking the action because of how deep-rooted my hoarding disorder was. And when I started making goals of what I wanted to do, I picked the room I wanted to declutter first, which was the smallest room in my house, and I just picked a drawer. And I think I maybe decluttered 5 things. And you know what? That was quite okay, because that's all I needed to overcome the fear and start this decluttering recovery journey. So please know that your fears are actually the cues to your healing journey in any area of your life. I also want you to know that it's okay if you fail a couple of times, because you're going to. It's inevitable. We're human. It's going to happen, and that's okay. I feel like I've learned more in my failures than I did in my accomplishments, believe it or not, because I knew where I had to make adjustments. And with that, I get to show you today's tossy pile. Look at how much we declutter now compared to the 5 things that I barely could let go of. You see the progress over time, and it's not scary anymore. And I think that's the biggest reward, is that I actually enjoy decluttering with all of you and showing the tossy piles and being able to give these items to other people who can use it too. This journey is very fulfilling, and I'm encouraging you to do the work within yourself because it's so worth. And now we have another row of craft bins that are decluttered and organized into categories with their check marks so that we know that they're done. And we'll continue to work on the crafts in the same way as before. And as a reward, I made this cute bracelet because it's so much more fun to craft when you actually know where your craft supplies are. And my hope and my prayer is that this video motivated and encouraged you to declutter and clean something in your home today too.